Hello friends, Steve here from Indiana Nature LLC. Today I am going to show you some of the features of our website. In particular, I'm going to show you some of the features of the GAINLP section of our website, which is the Great American Indiana Nature Lepidoptera project. Out of your sightings of butterflies, moths, and skippers over the past 2.5 years, we have built just around or just under 200 different pages. And recently, in the past few weeks or so, Amanda and I have done significant upgrades to these pages. And I'm going to walk you through these pages top to bottom, including talking about some of the original existing content as well as the new content that we've added. So if we look at our page here, we have at the very top the species name, the taxonomic name, first Actias luna, followed by the common name of Luna moth. Below that, we have the line which reads Linnaeus 1758. This is probably not clear to all of you what this means, but you see this very commonly following taxonomic names of not only species, but also some of the higher taxa, such as genre and families. And what this means essentially is the first part before the comma is the name of the person or persons who first described the species or taxa. In this case, the Actias luna moth was first described by famous Swedish taxonomist Carolus Linnaeus in 1758, which is the number that comes after the comma. So this is just letting us know, or it's giving tribute to the person who first described the particular taxa in question. Below that, we have this section which we call the taxonomic navigation, and essentially this is serving two different purposes. Purpose number one is it's giving us the exact placement of the taxa in the tree of life. So in the case of the Luna moth, we're going to start down at the bottom at the species name of Luna, which belongs to the genus of Actias, which is part of the tribe of Saturniinae, which is part of subfamily Saturniinae, which is part of family Saturniidae, which is part of superfamily Bombicoidea, which is part of the order of Lepidoptera, which of course is the butterflies, moths, and skippers. Subfamily, or superfamily rather, of Bombicoidea are the silk and sphinx moths. It's part of the class of Insecta, which are insects obviously, the subphylum of Hexapoda, the phylum of Arthropoda, and finally the kingdom of animals, Animalia. So this gives us the perspective of exactly where this taxa lies in the tree of life. It also provides us with another function, and that is that these are in many cases hyperlinks. So for example, if we were to click on family Saturniidae in the taxonomic navigation, it's going to go ahead and load the page that we have created for that family of Saturniidae. And here we are at the Saturniidae page. And over here on the right hand side, notice also that a couple of different things. One is that the taxonomic navigation changes because we're at a much higher taxa. And then also over here on the right hand side, we have 3 different subfamilies of Saturniidae in Indiana. And we've limited these to just being in Indiana. We wanted to be very region specific with the environmental education that we're doing. There are other sources out there, iNaturalist and lots of other places that are doing taxonomy on a worldwide scale. We wanted to try to bring this right to the backyards of Hoosiers, and so we've kept it to Indiana specific. So we can go back to our Luna moth page. The next thing that I want to show you is the little element over here which contains the flags. We have an American flag, and below that we have an Indiana flag. And we have this right up at the top of the page as an indicator of whether or not this is a native species. And you'll see these flags change quite a bit depending on the species that we have featured, or the page that we're looking at. So the American flag indicates that the species is native to the United States of America, and below that, the Indiana flag obviously indicates that the species is native to Indiana. So in certain cases, we may have a Japanese flag instead of an American flag, which indicates that the origin of that particular species is Japan. Or we may have an American flag and below that a flag of Texas, which indicates that the particular species is native to the United States, but not to Indiana. However, it was transplanted here somehow. So that's our flags. Below that, below our taxonomic navigation, we have the Hodges number, and we've added we've had Hodges numbers on the web pages for some time now, but we've added a new feature to that, and that is a popover graphic. And if you look at the Hodges, the wording Hodges with the pound sign, the hashtag next to it, it's obviously a hyperlink, and this gives us the opportunity to hover over it, and this little popover comes up and it tells us what this means. In this case, Hodges number is a numbering system for the Lepidoptera of North America and Mexico that was introduced in 1983 by Dr. Ronald W. Hodges. And so this number corresponds with the number that Hodges designated for that particular species of Lepidoptera. It's used often in checklist form, and you'll see this very frequently with regards to butterflies and moths in particular. So we decided that we would go ahead and incorporate that into the page, but we added that popover to let folks know what Hodges number actually means. Below that we have the etymology, which is the origin of both the genus and the species, and this required a little bit of research into Greek and Latin wordings, and we can see that Actias, we believe, came from the Greek acti, which is pertaining to a ray or beam, and the species name, Luna, is Latin for moon, which is a reference to the Luna's moon-like eye spots, which we can see on our graphic very clearly there. Easy to see how it would have gotten its name. Below that we have the pronunciation. We start with a pronunciation key. We use the format of the Scholastic Dictionary as the model for our phonetic key here. There are many different and probably better phonetic keys out there, but the Scholastic Dictionary was simple enough to use, and more importantly, it didn't use any special characters that had some weird kerning issues with the font that we're using, which is Century Gothic for the page. So we have that, and then below that we have the audio file, and if we click on the audio file, Actias Luna, we can actually hear the translation, in this case me, and often you'll hear Amanda on this as well. Below that is another brand new feature, adult size and description, and this came out of our idea for producing a size comparison. So over on the right hand side of this we have a US quarter, which everybody is familiar with the size of, and then next to that we have a silhouette of the Luna moth to try to put things into a size perspective. As we move along through these species pages, when we get to some of the micro moths, which are literally like the size of a grain of rice, it will look very differently compared to the quarter. We also added a little bit of information, really mainly to fill the space over here, which includes the wingspan, the coloring and patternation. Sexual dimorphism is interesting. Essentially what that means is that males and females look differently in certain species to the naked eye. In other words, we don't have to dissect these animals to be able to tell the gender. In the case of the Luna moth, which is true for most, if not all, of the silk moths, the male have much larger antennae, and that are wider and perhaps more feathery, as we put it, as well as typically they will have longer tails than the females do. We added also this section on defense mechanisms, which is particularly interesting in moths and Lepidoptera because many of them are important food sources for birds and bats also. So they have evolved various methods of defense. In the case of Luna moth, the adults alone have 3 different methods of defense. One is camouflage, where the green coloring makes them blend in with leaves, and we'll look at an example of that in a few minutes. Mimicry with the eye spots, and I'll go and click on. I should probably mention now, over here on the right hand side of the page, we have these right columns, which are our featured photos. And what we've done with the featured photos is we have gone through and sort of created a template of how we wanted to present the various different life cycles and descriptions of these moths. So we start with an adult male, and then we go down to the adult female, and you can see the difference in the antennae size between the adult male and the adult female. But more importantly, we want to talk about these eye spots, which we mentioned before, which is where the species gets its name from. The eye spots are actually a defense mechanism. So if a predator were to come up upon this camouflage moth, maybe up in the top of a tree where it blends in, it's apt to see these large eye spots and perhaps confuse it with a much larger, a more dangerous or animal that maybe would have a method of fighting back, whereas the Luna moth wouldn't. And then the third defense mechanism are the tails themselves, which are really a dual function. The first function is that they're believed to, by scientists, to confuse bat echolocation. So as they're waving about, as the Luna moth is flying, it's actually thwarting the echolocation, the radar of bats. The second thing that they do is that they provide an easy target for predators to grab onto. So if we look at this moth, you probably have seen this in butterflies later in the season, where you'll have a swallowtail butterfly that's missing one or both of its tails, probably where a bird has attempted to eat it. It's nipped at the tail, but it's missed the body and the rest of the wing, and the moth or butterfly are able to fly off and complete their life cycle in many cases, having escaped the bird or the bat. So below that we have the range map, and the range map is not something new, but it's something that we have updated for our what we're calling the version 2.0 of the GAINLP pages. And what we've done with the range map is we've made it a little bit more pretty. So we've gone to an SVG graphic file instead of a PNG graphic file. So these are vector graphics instead of bitmap graphics, so they'll display better. They do take a little bit longer to load, though. We've added a background color, and we've added another one of those popover graphics, which is real similar to a tooltip that you may have seen, on the word records. So we say that this map illustrates documented North American records. And well, what does that mean? It means that we took the sightings data from 5 different sources. Technically it's 6 different sources because we're including our own project in there. And there have been some instances where we have had a species recorded to the GAINLP project that were not on any of these 5 data sources. And the 5 sources are bugguide.net, Butterflies and Moths of North America, known as BAMONA for short, the North American Moth Photographers Group at Mississippi State, or MPG, the Encyclopedia of Life, and iNaturalist. And so when compiling these maps, we went through those 5 sources and we looked to see whether or not there were records in the various states in the case of Canada, provinces, in the case of Mexico, the country in its entirety. And if there were, we put them into our database, and the database now is dynamically linked to the web page to where it will turn these individual geographical locations green if there is a confirmed sighting by any of those 5 or 6 with us entities. So in the case of Luna moth, you can see that it's pretty well widespread across North America, with the exception of a few of the western states and a couple of the extreme northern Canadian provinces. Its range is fairly diverse. Below that is conservation status. Conservation status is not something that's new, but it is something that probably deserves a little bit better clarification. And here again, we use the popover graphic to illustrate it. So what conservation status does is it's pulling upon the conservation rankings or status by NatureServe. And what is NatureServe? And well, we can hover over that and we can get our popover, which lets us know that NatureServe, this is a rating system established and maintained by the nonprofit NatureServe Incorporated, which works in conjunction with conservation agencies across North America to assess the vulnerability of species and ecosystems to extinction or extirpation. Then we have click the link for more information. So if you were to click on the link, I can actually right click and open it in a new tab just to show you so we can stay on the page. This is going to take us to the NatureServe website. And then this has a lot more information about how NatureServe obtains their rankings as well as about who they are. But for our purposes, we have 3 different maps. We have a global status, which is a map of the world, the national status, which is the map of the United States, and the Indiana status. In the case of this particular moth, both the global and the national status, according to NatureServe rankings, is a 5, which is an indicator of secure. This 5 is the highest designation that they have in terms of being at risk for extinction or extirpation. So this species, although it is in decline in certain areas, it is still believed to be globally and nationally secure. In Indiana, it's not ranked, and that usually indicates that it's not a species of concern or a listed species, certainly a listed species in Indiana. Below that, we have historical references, and Luna moth is a moth that has a lot of historical references, and for most of the moths that we produce, we won't have any information here, but for the ones that we do, it's kind of fun to include. So Drew Drury produced between 1770 and 1787 a 3-volume work called The Illustrations of Natural History, subtitled "Wherein are exhibited upwards of 240 figures of exotic insects." And in that 3-volume work, there was a plate which featured the Luna moth. And so this is something that's well in the public domain. And so we thought, well, why not include it? It's kind of interesting and fun and historical for sure. A word again about our right column. And I mentioned we have a format that we follow. In the case of the sexually dimorphic species, we go from adult male down to adult female. We go then to mating moths, should we have a mating species, and then to some individual features that maybe we want to highlight, like in this case a really nice close-up of an antennae, that the quadripectinate, meaning that it's 4-sided antennae that our friend Brian Lowry took. And we go through the various features on these featured photos. If you're not able to look at all of the photos, you're able to get a fair amount of information about the species based on the featured photos. Below our historical reference, the first historical reference, is kind of a neat thing that I just added today, which is a first day cover of the Luna Moth that was issued in 1987. I ordered this on eBay a week ago for this page, and it just came in about an hour ago, and I was able to scan it and add it to the page. So in 1987, the U.S. Postal Service issued a series of stamps on American wildlife, which featured the Luna Moth. And so for a princely sum of $2, I was able to have the first day issue delivered to me from California, and we included it on the webpage here. Below that is something that's far less whimsical and far more important, which are the floral associates. These are the host plants that these particular species need for their survival. Everyone is familiar with the monarch butterfly's relationship to milkweed plants. But the fact of the matter is that really all Lepidoptera are specialized to some degree in what they can eat as caterpillars. And this actually works out fairly well because we have the caterpillars just to the right of the larval food source table. So the larval food source table is the combined table showing all of the known food sources of Luna Moth caterpillars in Indiana. And this was something that really took a significant time to compile. If anyone is interested, there are references in the bibliography section of the GAINLP main page, which list all of our sources that we use for putting together these web pages. But this was one that we pulled from a few different sources to find the larval food sources, and we made a note above that they predominantly eat the foliage of native trees. Interestingly enough, Luna moths, like many in that superfamily, lack a digestive system. So the adults exist only for reproductive purposes, and they don't eat. They live only for a few days, and once their energy is expired, hopefully they've completed their reproductive task. So here is our larval food source table, and it's listed in order of alphabetically first by order, then by family, and then by genre. And we limited this to the things that are found in Indiana. So for example, if there is a species of tree that the Luna moth feeds on, but it's a western U.S. species, we didn't include it in this table. We wanted to, like everything that we do, we wanted to keep everything regionally centered for Hoosiers by Hoosiers. So this is one of the reasons probably why this moth is listed as a G5 and a N5, a secure species, is that unlike some of the more specialized feeders, it is able to eat from a fair amount of different food sources. And then below that, this is something that's kind of new, although it incorporates not so new elements. We then go into Indiana-specific things. And so we talk about the Luna moth in Indiana. And the first thing that we have is this map of Indiana. And the map of Indiana is something we've had for a while. We maintain a database, so when folks submit sightings of Lepidoptera to us, we enter the data from those sightings into a database, which is on our web server, and that database is tied to this map. And so the green indicates that we have had a GAINLP documented sighting in that county. So this is our own data that's coming from our people, our friends throughout Indiana who are photographing these moths at night or during the day, and sometimes, and submitting that data to us. So it's a very dynamic map. We started out with just a few counties, and as of the close of 2020, we now have 57 out of 92 counties. This is a new graphic that we added, the number of counties, and this is another new statistic that we added, which are the top counties, are the number and also their number of records. So we didn't have space. It looks like there's a lot of space here, but when we get into some of the smaller screen resolutions, we didn't have space to add more of the counties here, and so we have just, I think, 7 or 8 listed here. Monroe, Marion, Hamilton, Hendricks, Washington, Brown, and Owen are the top counties where this species has been recorded at. Sightings by month is not a new feature, however we have added some new features to it, and it's one of the more cool things, I guess, that we have on these web pages. This is one of only a couple of different scripts that we use that we didn't produce in-house. One of the questions that we get a lot is what software we're using to design our web pages with, and the answer is that we, for the most part, we hand code everything, but in certain cases, we use some trick JavaScripts to be able to do some neat things, and this is one of them. It's called JS Chart, and in our sightings by month, if you notice up at the top in the key, we have caterpillars, cocoons, adults, and eggs, and they're all color coded, and this gives us a visual indication of the number of these various life forms that are recorded per month. One thing that you may or may not have noticed is that if you're on a desktop computer, you can hover over these bars and they will actually display the data. In this case, 62 adults, or we can go down and hover over caterpillars, and we can see that we've got 5 caterpillars for August recorded. And these are all years combined, the sightings by month. There's actually 2 different broods of Luna moths. There's a spring brood and a summer brood, and you can really clearly see how that is illustrated by the graph here. Another cool thing we can do is if we wanted to only see a specific life form, we can click on these and we can turn off. If we only wanted to see caterpillars, for example, we can turn off the other elements, or if we wanted to see everything but adults, we can leave adults unchecked but turn everything else on. And a new feature, this is something we've had around for a while, a new feature though is we've added the data for the earliest live adult, which in this case was seen by Brian Lowry in Scott County on April 7th. Scott County, extreme southern Indiana, which would account for it being the place where we had the earliest sighting. And then the latest live adult observation was by Angie Valenti in Porter County, which is the extreme northern end of Indiana, on October 7th. So that's our sightings by month. Below that, we have a new feature, which is called total sightings by year. And what we've done with this is we've combined the data for the 3 years. It's really 2.5 years of the GAINLP project. And so 2018 was when we launched this thing. We were off to a late start. We didn't have very many participants, and we didn't have really the early season stuff, so it had low numbers for that reason. This is extremely non-scientific because we're not filtering it by the number of observers. It's just kind of a fun graphic that maybe will show some very rough non-scientific trends of the number of individuals counted. At some point in the future, we could probably add more metrics to this to add the mean number of observers and some other data to it, but we just haven't gotten to that point yet. We also added above that the total number of observations, all years combined, and the total number of field observers. So we've had 138 different people submitting records of just this one species of moth in Indiana. Below that is another new feature, sightings by gender. I mentioned earlier that Luna moths are sexually dimorphic, so we can tell the males from the females easily in most cases by looking at them or looking at their antennae. So this graph takes that into account, and again, if we hover over it, and if you're on a mobile device, you actually have to click it. So because you can't hover, right? So if you're on your iPhone or Android, you can click on this green area, and you can see that there were 109 male Luna moths submitted to the project, and there were 44 female moths. So this is an interesting chart, because why would there be well over twice the amount of males recorded than the females are recorded? The answer probably is that females tend to stay put, and the males tend to search for the females with their larger antennae. So they're more out and about and coming to lights and flying around searching. And then lastly, we have our image gallery. Image gallery is something we've had around for a long time. We've made some vast changes to it, though. The old image gallery would have one row per sighting. It would have, contained in that row would be the name of the observer and county and the date, and then a small thumbnail image. And we were limited to 2 thumbnail images because we didn't have room for any more. And so with this new gallery, and this was something that came out of the Wildflower project, we were able to really completely recode this to have these images display almost as like table card records, where and they're organized by sighting date. So a future improvement that we're planning to do by the website is to make these things sortable in different ways, but in essence of time and trying to keep the projects moving along, we haven't incorporated that feature yet. We have incorporated the records per page feature, so we can change this if we wanted to go from 50, we can go to 100 records per page. We kept 50 as a good default number. It'll load the results, and here's now we're showing 100 results per page. And another really fun thing that we added was the phenophase codes as well as the gender codes. And the phenophase codes we developed from the North, where is it? Here it is. The USA National Phenology Network, which maintains a listing of these codes. And we found that most of their codes were great, but there were a few things that we had sightings of that they didn't necessarily have codes for, and so we modified their code slightly into our own Indiana Nature Phenophase code set. So for example, if we look at this record from April in Hendricks County, we see the phenophase code of PU, and we can go up here and we can see that PU is a phenophase code for pupae, or Rick's photo from Owen County in September is AC. Well, what is AC? AC is an active caterpillar. We also have the gender codes listed on here as well. So here's a female, here's a male. And if we click on these images, we have our light box opens up. The information is still on the sighting and the observer and the county, phenophase code, the gender, life form. It's all still here. And we can scroll through our images this way if we wanted to just really kind of take a look at all of the representative images to the project. And we have some magnificent photographers and very dedicated people who have submitted work to this project, and we're very grateful for them. And then the last thing I want to talk about is responsiveness. And so if you're watching this on your phone, you're probably thinking that it looks much different than it does on the screen that I'm showing, and that's because we incorporated responsiveness into the website. And what I mean by responsiveness, and I'm going to minimize the window here a little bit, and you can see as we change, I'm not sure how well this is going to display, but as we change our sizing, we're going to have our objects move around. And finally, once we get down to our mobile, not quite there yet. We'll see when we get to mobile, we'll have, there we are, mobile, we have the little hamburger menu pop up. It looks much differently because we've changed the way that these images will display in mobile form. And once we get down to the gallery, instead of having 9 images across, we have 3 images across. But it works the same way, where we can click our pages and we can scroll through all of our sightings. It may take a few seconds to load depending on your internet speed. And that's it. That is GAINLP version 2.0. If you are a contributor to this project, we certainly thank you for your contributions. And if you've made it through the 35-minute ordeal of showing this to you, we're thankful for your patience. Please continue to keep your sightings coming, and as you can see, we're creating quite an extensive resource for Hoosiers by Hoosiers. Talk to you soon.